Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you all. Good morning. Thank you all very much for joining this talk. So my name's Alastair Worth. I'm the IoT Solutions Director for Avnet Silica. I've been in this marketplace for pretty much all my working life. I've had a variety of jobs. I've been general manager of a wireless company. I've been a global sales and marketing director for a blue chip company. I've worked with startups, and now I'm part of the Silica team, heading up their IoT product portfolio. And when I chose the title of what I wanted to talk about, it seemed like an absolutely fantastic idea, but I realized that actually what I was trying to do was effectively boil the entire ocean of the world of electronics and design and make versus buy into 30 or 40 minutes. So I can only really give you some snapshots and some considerations that you might want to have in your own journeys. But before I get into the detail of what I want to talk about, I just want to ask actually for a little bit of audience participation, just to check that we're all with us. So if you are a design engineer, could I just see your hands up in the air? Hardware design engineer. Okay, lovely stuff. That's probably about a third of you. Who is a software engineer? You are, sir. Put your hand in the air. Sorry, I was looking at him. I didn't look at you. Look. Okay, so we got an equal number, maybe slightly ahead. Okay, and who is in a management role? Who's running a company? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, quite a lot. We're getting to more than 100% at this rate, so some of you must be both. And who is an aspiring manager that wants to be a manager? Only 1, 2. It's not that bad being in management, honestly. Sometimes. Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much for that. It gives me a good flavour, a good cross section. So we've got people from really all of the walks of the electronic life here. So that's fantastic. So let's start off by talking a little bit about what is. Bearing in mind, I'm giving you this perspective with you see the source of the data, Federal Reserve Bank of New York, but also I'm trying to flavour this with a perspective of Avnet. So Avnet, for those of you that don't know us, it's a $24 billion global company, and here in Europe, for the division that I represent part of, we are into the, let's say, $3 billion plus of turnover. So if we look at this, so the GS CPI, it's a relatively new metric, and it takes data actually from a load of sources, and it's all related to the overall supply chain. And what we've got on the y-axis here is the number of standard deviations that the index is over or under the average. It isn't designed to be a forecasting tool, but it is a very useful tool nonetheless. I have this was data from a few months ago. The trends continue. I do have the latest data, but the graph wasn't so easy to read. So from late 2020, we go into the past and early into early 2023. Some of you may be familiar with the phrase the golden screw, and this was the so-called the sort of elusive part that was needed to complete a PCB, and the main drivers for that were, of course, COVID, the loss of production very much related to COVID, and the fact that we were, and our kids, if you're of my age, were all stuck at home and all buying new electronic devices for themselves, which sucked up some of the availability of product. So we had very much a peak in demand from the market, and massive supply chain pressures over the last year, easing as this year has come on. And what this actually means is that we're heading towards a stabilization or potentially a correction in the market at about now. And this is the manufacturer's new orders contract. This is data from the States, but nevertheless it's mirrored by data here in Europe. You know the phrase, when America sneezes and Europe catches a cold. So lead times are reducing, and OEMs themselves are, of course, reducing their own stock in correlation to that lead time reducing. And that means, of course, that for us in the business, there is a contraction of new orders being placed within the market. And there is also a slowdown in demand. So what does that actually mean for us is where I really want to go to. So I don't think there's a pointer on here, but essentially 2023, let's consider the business to be broadly flat. But where things start to change again is in 2024. So we do see a rebound, or we do project a rebound in growth, and the leading factors of that are automotive, industrial, mil-aero, but APAC is leading that trend. Growth is likely to be below the pandemic levels, but there is still some growth, and there are indeed some pressures in the supply chain. Now, if you take the automotive market sector, for example, if you take a medium-sized family car like an Audi A4, if you've just got the standard version of that particular car, you're looking at something like $400 worth of electronic components in that. And yes, car manufacturers are making less cars at the moment, but actually they're generally of a higher specification. So if it's a full EV product, a level 3 autonomous driving, that number triples or potentially quadruples. So there are starting to become pressures again, despite the fact that lead times are falling in the supply chain due to the increased complexity of the products that are actually going into the market. So yes, there's a relaxation of demand within the market, but actually we are expecting to see that ASPs are going to continue to increase. And yes, of course, it's partly due to inflation. And you say, well, inflation has a knock-on to labour costs, and of course that also has a knock-on to raw material prices. I was talking to somebody in the memory market earlier on this morning, and they're actually expecting to see in the industrial grade memory potential market price rises, starting with challenges towards the beginning of first quarter next year of between 40 to 60%. So today, right now, what does it mean? Lead times are going to stabilise. They're going to stay to where they are. In the very short term, there is likely to be a decline in market pricing for components while this correction effect goes on in the market. But actually, as customers are reducing their forward order covers, fabs are booking less capacity, and so the outlook potentially, this is a potential outcome, but it is by many commentators viewed as quite likely and almost certain in the memory space, is that you're going to see, first of all, during 2024, an increase in the price points of the electronics, but then potentially in the back end of 2024, sort of heading towards allocation trend. So the message to you is, okay, we're all fine at the moment, but think hard and fast about what you're designing in now, and also think about your supply chain and the supply chain security as we start to move into next calendar year. Security. So who's aware of the EU Cyber Security Resilience Act? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not many. Okay. Well, it is coming. It's coming our way. But the last information that was actually came out from the European Parliament, you see down on the bottom there, that's actually on May 2023. It was a 2-page document, and I just took a screen grab of a bit of it, which essentially says here, as you see in red, more complicated. There's a lot of infighting, and there's a lack of agreement within the community. So that is coming, and this is, if you're designing your products, you need to be thinking this is coming. It's likely to be 2025 by the time it's finally ratified. And at the moment, there isn't a clear path to enforcement, but you need to be aware of it, because absolutely security is something that you need to give consideration to. You know that, right? We all know that. But not just because it's regulated, because at the end of the day, the success or failure of your product, or potentially your company, is absolutely incumbent upon you from a reputation perspective. So if you're not thinking about it now, you should be. And when this act comes into force, the expectation is the kinds of fines that they can levy are on a similar level as GDPR, which is something like 2.5% of your global turnover, or I think 15 million is the headline figure. So you, as manufacturers or OEMs, are going to be responsible for this, and ultimately 3 years is going to pass in the blink of an eye. You could potentially be held accountable for that. So we can deep dive security. That's a whole day's topic, but we can deep dive security if you want to come and see us on the stand. So how can you ensure that your connected products remain secure? It needs to be baked in at the start of your hardware design journey, and you need to review that and look at the common attack vectors. One of the things that we do quite a lot of as Avnet, as Avnet, we've got in total about 750 people that work in, let's call it software, of which security can be a part of. There's hardware security and there's software security. Some of the things that we do and we recommend when we're working with customers on designing code is to have actually a contract with them, and that contract is a maintenance contract, and it includes guaranteed SLAs. So you have regular products and security updates going into market, and that is provided for by us. But it doesn't need to be by us. It's something you can do yourself. The main point is here is that you need to give consideration to these factors, and always make sure you've got a robust mechanism for OTA, because there's nothing worse for your reputation and your bank balance and your sleep at night to have a product that's bricked in the market that you've got to send a truck to go and do. And I've seen it time and time again, and I bet half the people in the room have also seen that. So give that serious consideration. And then, who wants to build a product at scale in this room? Everybody? Some of you? All of you? Scale generally, not always, but scale generally equals more volume, more money. You know, you want to be sitting on a beach, right, in 10 years' time drinking a pina colada. I do. There's nothing wrong with that. So scale. So you need to think about, if you've got aspirations of scale, you need to think about how you can actually get that product out there at scale, but not actually burn a hole in your bank balance on getting it there. So you need to give consideration to what is representative of a real world scenario, and then implement that at your device level, thereby being financially more efficient. And the last point really on this, and the software people in the room, which there are many, will know this phrase, technical debt. So technical debt is really easy to gain. It's about, I'm just going to kludge this thing together because I need to get it out in the market and I want to make it work. So I'll just kludge it together. And then you've made one thing that does one thing, and then you realize actually you want to reuse your code over a variety of platforms. So just watch out for technical debt. It is super easy to do. You software guys and girls, I know you've all done it. Think about, is it really the right thing to do? I know we're all tempted to do it because it kind of feels good to get the manager off the back. I've done it. There you go. But the manager will come and get you later. You agree, don't you? You know that. Yeah. Right. Another consideration is make versus buy. Your IP, your idea, right, that's yours. But the other stuff that makes that happen, should you really try and make it? Do you want to make your own operating system? Well, probably if you get paid by the hour and you don't have a timeline. But for the rest of us living on planet real world, that's not going to happen. So think about, which bits of the hardware, which bits of my ecosystem do I make, and which bits do I actually buy. And for your decision-making process about that, think about where where you're going to sell it, potentially geographically, what's going on in the market. So to my piece earlier on about, okay, where are we now? Well, lead times have all stabilised. Pricing looks like it's going to go down. The world's a brilliant place, but it's about to get a bit complicated again. So think about that. Don't just think that the present market status is going to be the future market status, and think about your own roadmap as well, because if you can reuse stuff across a portfolio, then you're heading in the right direction. Now that's what the big companies out there will do. They want scale, but they want repeatability, and they absolutely want to avoid technical debt, because in the end, when you end up with 10 product families in the market and they all have different needs, you end up with an engineering department that is 5 times bigger than your sales department and a bank balance that's 5 times more in the red than it should be. So please think about that. We talked about connected products. Well, pretty much everything is connected in one way or another these days. So what's happening in connectivity? There is some convergence from PAN and LAN. They're melding together in the building space. I think it's very hard these days. Is anybody making a product that isn't connected to something? I don't mean the mains electricity or a battery, but is anybody making something that's not connected? Okay. Anybody making a wirelessly connected product, or in a company that makes wirelessly connected products? Come on, I know I've put you all to sleep, but it can't be that few of you. Almost everybody. Right. So there's a little nod in that direction, and also because I used to run a wireless company, I couldn't help but put in a few slides on this. So wireless used to be an absolute minefield. Nothing worked with anything else, and you had all these different and competing standards, and it was like, well, what on earth am I going to do? What standard should I look for, and what is the functionality that they actually require on it? Actually, so the CSA is working on this app. Sorry, my slides are slightly in the wrong order. So the CSA, which is consisting of this lot, some pretty big names there, is working on Matter. And if you're making a connected home type of product, then Matter is going, excuse the terrible pun, can you guess what I'm going to say next? Matter is going to, well done, you win a prize. Well done. At least one person's still awake. Thank you for that. So come and see me after school and I'll give you a Mars bar. So Matter, if you're making a product or looking to make a product that goes into this domestic kind of home automation stuff, you need to be looking absolutely at this standard, because 8 out of 10 customers that we speak to nowadays, I hadn't really heard of Matter a year ago, and it's all about Matter now. It is important. And in terms of wireless, well, of course, it's not wireless without an antenna, is it? And we, as hardware engineers in the room, spend an inordinate amount of time browsing data sheets and maybe even, or perhaps this is just me, making spreadsheets of comparisons. What's the throughput, what's the power consumption? I make my nice decision-making spreadsheet and then present it to my boss, who then says, well, okay, you forgot to put in how much everything costs. So then you speak to the purchasing manager and you add that line in, and then you all have a big meeting together and you look at the pros and cons of the features and benefits of these products and the costs and the supply chain and all of that stuff that's in the ecosystem of your decision making within within your own structure. And at the end, sometimes as an afterthought, although I have to say as an industry we've got better at this, but sometimes as an afterthought, you just bolt on some kind of antenna that you've bought from China without much consideration to its propagation properties, and of course you end up with an entirely suboptimal result. Or even worst case scenario, you stick on an antenna, you haven't given consideration to it, you spend a load of money sending it to a test lab. Has anybody ever done this? Oh, I'm sure there'll be a few smiles. You bolt an antenna on it, send it to a test lab because you assume that it's going to work, because you know you've got a pre-approved module in your design and you've kind of got a pre-approved antenna, but you haven't checked that they're actually approved together. And the test lab comes back with a report with a big red X on it. You've spent your money, and unfortunately, you've basically just yes, you've got a test report and you know why it's failed, but you've got to spend the same amount of money again, or nearly the same amount of money again, to have this thing retested. Isn't that right, sir? Have you ever done that?
I calculated everything beforehand and used measurement equipment to actually validate my design.
Perfect.
Any first time.
Good job. Good job. If only everybody did that. So, just some things to consider. This is just a relatively simple product. If you've got display, it gets more complex, but I didn't really have the ability to go into this in much detail. So, think about co-location. Follow the advice from the back of the room there. Well done, sir. Follow his advice. Look at this stuff, but it is actually quite a complex and specialist subject matter. If you are making your wireless device and you want to get into the detail of this, then we can absolutely help you. We've got a range of specialists that are particularly focused on this kind of thing. So, short little piece there, really, about wireless and what's happening. If anybody's it's not the Matter standard, but there is an EV standard as well. If anybody's into the EV space, we can also, not here now, but if anybody's looking at making EV chargers, there's also new standards coming into the EV charging space, and we can talk to you about that offline in more detail. So if you're interested, come and have a chat with us. And then device to cloud. So you all said, I think pretty much without exception, you're all making a connected device. And you will all definitely need, if not all of these, the vast majority of these things, because everybody has got to do the same thing, right? This is what your enterprise level wireless integration is going to be looking like. You're going to need to do all of this. If you're not doing any of it, or some of it, then maybe ask yourself the question, why? Particularly on things like over-the-air firmware management, so over-the-air upgrades. So think about, do you want to, yes, you can go online with your credit card, or as your business, you can go and you can talk to AWS or Azure, and you can go and get an account. You can design your management platform in the cloud. But don't forget, if you design it, you've got to maintain it. And that's engineering overhead, software engineering overhead, that you have now burnt because you can't use that. You've got to pay for that, and that is stopping you. You know, you've got to trade off between, I want to develop my IP, because your IP is actually what is going to sell your product. On the cloud side of things, there are a whole host of companies that have pre-built PaaS applications, and you rent them. Okay, it's their job to provide you with all the nines uptime. It's their job to do all of the patches. It's their job to provide a ticket desk to make sure it's all secure. So think about, because it's very easy, and particularly if you're in the early stages and you're making your own products, really easy in the early stages to go, right, well, I'll just put it on IoT Central. not totally scalable, and sorry, IoT Hub, I beg your pardon. IoT Hub, it's not totally scalable. You will have engineering overhead or software engineering overhead. So think about where you spend your time and what's actually important to your business, because it is tempting, I know, to go and develop your own stuff because cloud is cool, but it's also a massive time trap, and time equals money. We are pretty much now at the Q&A stage. That was a fairly, as I said at the beginning, sort of boiling the ocean of electronics life, and couldn't go into the detail that perhaps some of the subject, well, all of the subject areas would really deserve. I can't promise you I can answer any really difficult questions, but I can promise you that I can try to. So we'll take, do I sound like the king? I will take questions if anybody would like to ask a question. There is a microphone here somewhere. I don't know where it's gone. Oh, it's over there. There you go. You get to be the first. Please be gentle.
Okay. You mentioned stuff about in the beginning that we had the supply chain crisis, obviously because of COVID, Brexit, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
How did Avnet kind of deal with that? Like, what allowed you to stay afloat? Because I know a lot of companies went down when that happened. So what was it that you guys did? Do you know, in that aspect, in the supply chain aspect?
Okay. Well, that's. Oh, well, shall I take that back? Well, actually, no. You hold on to it because you might want to come back to it. So that's a really good question, and one that I'm probably somewhat unqualified to answer, because within the organisation of this, $24 billion company, we've got Avnet Logistics Services, which is an entire and huge team that are responsible for managing both what we buy and how all the logistics services around that. Of course, Avnet suffered the same. We can't. We can mitigate the effects of market forces to some extent with our scale and our forward thinking, but what we can't do is completely isolate customers from that. As a company, so yes, we saw, of course, that lead times were increasing and prices were increasing, and that had a knock-on effect to our end customers. But some of the things that, so you can't rely on an Avnet or another company to solve that problem for you unless you potentially take some action yourself in terms of what your company is prepared to do. So in electronics and in life, there's always something that you can negotiate. So you want to buy a product at a forward pricing rate of something, then you have to take a strategic decision to make a commitment to your supplier and then have a supply chain agreement with them. No supplier in the world is going to guarantee you a price. There's going to be some small print from sales in there that says, by the way, if this thing happens, we reserve the right to put your price up within the market. But at least you can proactively so you can think now and take steps now that could insulate you to some extent from what some commentators would say is coming. Particularly to that, what I was saying about the memory prices, I think that seems to be leading us into price increase next year. I'm not totally qualified to say that, but from the information that I have sight of, that looks like the first one in. Great question. How was the answer?
It was good. Thank
okay,
you.
I can keep my job.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, I didn't decide that, but.
Okay, brilliant. Anybody else would like to ask anything? Everybody's thinking about dinner. I'm not sure I blame you. I'm starving too.
Actually, to expand on the previous question, you may have heard that China imposed its own counter-sanctions on Western manufacturers in semiconductor war, and they now want to limit supply of semiconductor materials like germanium, for example, used in electronics.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know if, or I don't know, commentators, as you say, what do they think about it? Will it make an impact?
Ooh, yes, I give you the little knowledge that I have on that. So the US has got the I forget the precise name of it, the Chip Act, and they're spending something like 200 billion to reduce their reliance on. And please correct me by the way, if anybody's got figures, because I'm trying to remember this and I could have them wrong, but I think it's 200 billion to try to isolate themselves from the effects of precisely what you've just described. But as far as I know, even if that were fully ramped up and in operation, that would only dent the world's supply chain of components by about 8%. So what is the advice on that? Well, I'm afraid it's going to be as simplistic as the previous advice, because we can't control, none of us can control global politics and global economics, and they're going to have macro effects to everything that we do. The best that you can hope to do is to somewhat insulate and isolate yourselves from this, and you're right, it could be a biggie, is by first of all looking at what the manufacturers are that you're actually buying the products from. So that's actually a separate conversation. So look at where you're buying, who are the OEMs for the products that you're buying, and then secondly, my advice would be, again, similar to the last question, would be to actually start to have a conversation about security of supply chain with your supply chain partner. But yeah, you're right. That is potentially some kind of Armageddon future, but I don't think anybody can afford for that to happen, so I think there'll be more posturing than reality. Let's hope I'm right. Good question. Thank you very much. Anything else? Anybody else? We've got about 5 minutes left, or we can wrap early depending on what people would like to do.
Hello, you mentioned some PaaS, platform as service.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not wrong, your proposal is IoT Connect. Can you tell a little about that offering?
Yes, thank you for that question. So that's right. It's called IoT Connect, and in essence, this is something that Avnet's been investing in for the last 5 years, and it is a PaaS platform. It's designed to do. If we went back into my presentation of that, it does all of that. There's a whole load of more as well, but this is the sort of basics that everybody has to do. The reason that we as Avnet did it was that we saw a lot of the bottlenecks within, and also the problem areas with getting a connected device to the market was this stuff. And whilst I said we've got 750 people in software, we're actually a hardware distribution, designing demand generation company. So it's in our interest to sell more hardware. So the way we can sell more hardware is actually to speed customers to market by making this bit, which is the foundations that everybody has to do. All of you in the room making connected product is to provide this. So that's the reason that we went down that path. And it's cloud. It can work with AWS. It can work with Azure. And it's enabled by SDKs, and we have very, very robust SDKs that are focused really on the suppliers' products that we provide into the market. So sorry, that was slightly salesy, but please bear with me. So if you remember the old was it Remington advert? He liked it so much he bought the company. Well, effectively that's what Avnet did. So we made an acquisition for nearly 5 years ago now to enable us to help our customers. Thank you. Okay, we're nearly out of time. There's probably time for one more question if we've got one. Otherwise, I'll say thank you very much indeed for all your time, and have a great day. Do come and see us, stand 10, if you want to talk about any of this in more detail. So, thank you very much.